Want more Gators Breakdown? Join Gators Breakdown Plus. Starting at $3 a month, get access to unique episodes, plus a blog, chat room, giveaways, shout-outs, and more. Gators Breakdown Plus is furthering the interaction with fans and listeners like you. Head to gatorsbreakdown.supportingcast.fm to join Gators Breakdown Plus today. Gators Breakdown, because there's never a dull moment in Gator Nation.
Never a dull moment for sure, especially 2 episodes in one day. Here we go. Gators Breakdown podcast is ready to go. I'm your host, David Waters. You can find me on Twitter at GatorDave_SEC, coming at you on the heels not long within the hour or so of reports from Bruce Feldman from The Athletic. He is reporting defensive coordinator Todd Grantham, offensive line coach John Hevesy will be fired, will be let go at the University of Florida. This coming on the day after Florida takes a 40-17 thumping from South Carolina. So, of course, initial reaction out there, too little, too late. With this move from Dan Mullen, University of Florida, to get rid of, more specifically, Todd Grantham, but also John Hevesy, of course. We've heard the voices for that one as well. Not as high as we've heard the ones from Todd Grantham, especially after the way the offensive line and the run game had looked earlier this year, but still, given the whole big picture, both these coaches, hard to justify keeping them around any longer. So here we go. Todd Grantham, defensive coordinator, offensive line coach John Hevesy on their way out at the University of Florida, according to Bruce Feldman. So I can back up definitely the Grantham one. It was probably an hour and a half before that tweet come out. There was definitely a meeting that happened between, from what I was told, Big Booster, Strickland, at least that group of people, and changes wanting to be made. So whether at this point in time Dan Mullen was forced to make this move, or look, I think the move was coming either way, at least for Grantham. Now, this could this have sped up the timeline? Absolutely. I think that's very possible, especially after what we saw on the field Saturday night. Look, I mean, this defense just was nowhere close to getting it done the last 2 seasons. And look, I mean, Todd Grantham, started with Dan Mullen at 2017 at Mississippi State, had a pretty formidable defense there. And look, he put his name in the ring, his name in the hat to take over for Dan Mullen at Mississippi State as head coach. When Dan Mullen decided to leave Mississippi State and come to Florida, Todd Grantham waited around to see if he would get that head job. He did not. Dan Mullen decided to bring Todd Grantham over to Florida. And given the history between the University of Florida and Todd Grantham dating back to his Georgia days, this is a move a lot of people didn't like to begin with. I know plenty of people who never wanted to see Todd Grantham on the Florida Gators sideline ever, and did not like the move when it was announced that he would be coming from Mississippi State to Florida. So, of course, 2018 comes along, and the defense is, does its thing, and about what you could expect in a first year transition. A good defense, struggled in some areas, but year one, you kind of forgave those struggles against. You had the big win versus LSU, a good LSU offense with Joe Burrow's first year. The defense very instrumental in getting that victory, dating back to 2018. But then, of course, you had the Georgia game that really soured a lot of people. The Missouri game as well. Kentucky to start the year. Kentucky, basically just ran roughshod over Florida. Basically, the theme of what we've seen this year, Todd Grantham's introduction as a Florida Gator defensive coordinator came along with Kentucky getting their first win over Florida in forever. So, started on a rocky note, and then turned it around a bit. Struggled versus South Carolina in 2018 as well. That was Georgia, Missouri, South Carolina. Those 3 games back to back to back where the defense had struggled. Settled down for the rest of the year to end the year on a pretty good note as the schedule lightened up. But okay, then you take those pieces in 2018, and you had Chauncey Gardner-Johnson at that star position. Hasn't looked that good since 2018. But then he goes, and you go back. Then you move forward to 2019. And I mean, Florida's had those defensive lines, those sack numbers under Todd Grantham. But all this mayhem and havoc we thought we would be getting from Todd Grantham hasn't been there necessarily all too much. If the defensive line cannot get the pressure. I mean, he had the benefit of having a Ja'Kai Polite and Jabari Zuniga and Jonathan Grenard when he first came here. And those 3 guys, especially, Polite in the first year, Grenard the second year, he had Zuniga just a hair step below. Probably in that 2019 season, had he been able to stay healthy, would have been way up there with those guys too. But, I'll give him credit for that. Those 2 years in the havoc up front, but it was always about those big games. And then, you move forward from 2018 to 2019, and it was about, just taking those next steps and getting better. And look, nobody was stopping that 2019 LSU team, but, Florida wasn't even close. And you go back to just so many times of the third and Grantham. And now you go to that Georgia game as well after that LSU game, and a Georgia offense that wasn't really moving the ball all that well under Jake Fromm. And still, you can't get to the quarterback, can't get them off the field on third down. So it was just the big games that you wanted to see this defense step up in. You never really got it. And okay, did some good things. Florida had only 2 losses in 2019. You take that, take all that in 2020, where you're going to have this high flying offense, and COVID happens, all that we know that, and then of course the bottom falls out. No need repeating that history all that much, but that was, with those Georgia LSU losses and making quarterbacks look better than they probably are. I know you started hearing rumblings of this defense will never get to the point it needs to get after that 2019 season. But then you were hoping in 2020 that the offense was going to be so good that as long as you got a repeat of 2018, 2019, you thought it'd be okay. Then 2020 comes along, and you can pretty much blame the defense for anything big this Florida team could have handled, could have went to. Wasn't going to happen because of this defense. And it was obvious from the get-go. Lane Kiffin, Ole Miss, Matt Corral, game 1. Okay. It was the first game of the season. COVID hits. Not a lot of working out. Not a lot of practice. Okay. We'll forgive it. But then it never stopped. Didn't matter who you were playing. Couldn't get off the field on third down. Giving up. Tackling has been an issue. No matter when the defense was good in 2018, 2019, still tackling was an issue back then. And then tackling's been an issue every year since, but really, really came to a head in 2020. But there were so many built-in excuses that just kept getting ramped up that, I fell victim to, as well as the beginning of 2020. Say, okay, we got those are the excuses. Let's see if they continue. And they did continue. And then there were no more excuses. And then you saw this Florida offense lighten up the scoreboard, but then still in a game in midway through a third quarter or a fourth quarter. A game that should have been a blowout, but no, the defense can't get off the field. And then, of course, it just happens, and it happens again, and it happens again, especially toward the end of the season in 2020. And you finally got the big win over Georgia, but then in the season, this ends up happening 2 years in a row. You play an LSU team that's just dismantled, and Todd Grantham, for whatever reason, can't adjust, can't defend a Max Johnson quarterback for LSU. He lights the defense up. And, look, of course, just rehashing 2020, probably be a bit too much. We all know what happened. But, 2020 was the final call for me, at least. And, I hang on probably longer than most, but even I was, I know in a lot of people's eyes, 2020 was just 1 year. It's okay. A lot of people point back to 2018 and 2019. Maybe we can get back to that form. Well, 2020 was the start of the great collapse of the defense and just never recovered. Have they done some nice things this year? Have they been better? And they started better. Not necessarily say at this moment, at this time in 2021, this defense is any better than what it was in 2020, because it certainly doesn't look like it. Given the competition, given who you've played, no, I'm not so sure. Not so sure that they are any better. LSU game a few weeks ago. Now, of course, a lot of people will give them credit for the Georgia game a couple weeks ago, and yeah, they played okay in that, but didn't really mean anything. Then bottom falls out. The episode's already out for Florida, South Carolina. Look back, rock bottom. I mean, yeah, but that's been rock. What happened versus South Carolina? The defense hit rock bottom last year. This is just a continuation of that. So, yeah, could not. And look, Dan Mullen put a lot of risk bringing back Todd Grantham. And you're kind of seeing that play out this year. I was ready to move on. Most of you were ready to move on. Not all of you. I know some people were still hanging on, hoping there would be some kind of turnaround there, but there really wasn't. Recruiting has been an issue. Yeah, your better players are on that side of the ball, but guys don't fit where they need to play. You have to hit the transfer portal very hard for defensive tackles to be able to sustain play. No difference makers there. I mean, you got the defensive tackles for depth. You got the defensive tackle for bodies, but besides Dexter, who I don't necessarily think he can do it all by himself, but even his production's kind of fallen off lately. I mean, there's not a lot of there's nothing you can really point to with this defense anymore. And really, a lot of it's going back to recruiting and so many bucks and outside linebacker types that are now having to play true linebacker. All the issues in the secondary, young cornerbacks. And of course, injuries happen there, but still not that stature of defensive back play we come to expect at the University of Florida. DBU has went away under Todd Grantham. I mean, maybe there's a realization. I mean, I think we've known that, but now put it to words. Now that he's on his way out, there's no DBU at Florida anymore. While talking, you had it maybe 2018, still a little bit with Gardner Johnson and TJ Henderson and all that, but it's went away. No longer there. And that fell under Todd Grantham. No more DBU. Far from DBU. Can't even count on that anymore. And you still got some talented players. You still got Kyrie Elam. You still got Jason Marshall and Jaden Hill injured. Avery Helm young. But there's not those lockdown stereotypes. I mean, even you go back to the Athletic article last week detailing this Florida defense, and you got SEC East coaches talking about how soft this defense is, how Grantham doesn't make any kind of adjustments. And I'm sitting here talking about DBU and defensive backs. You even got the SEC East coaches saying they're not really even scared of Kyrie Elam all that much. Even though, projected, I mean, not a top 10 pick anymore now. It looks like it, but first round, maybe second round pick right now. I mean, draft stock's getting hurt from a lot of these players. And that's not a good look. But sitting here right now, and this is it's too easy, and this is more big picture Dan Mullen as well, but it's too easy to get the athletes that you need to play defense at the University of Florida to be this bad. I mean, I'm sitting there watching the South Carolina game in the stadium, and we've talked about all the communication issues from last year's defense, and they're still there to some degree. Guys running on and off the field. It's too complex of a defense. I've been told that by people closer than me to it. And it's weird how that doesn't make sense in a way. If you look at 2018 and 2019, the first couple of years, of the defense. Okay, well, if it's complicated, how come it's better in year 1 and year 2 when you're trying to install the defense? And guys that you didn't recruit and guys don't have as much time. Well, I'll let you know, talent a little bit takes over a bit there. A lot of talent on those early defenses for that Florida defense. They were able to kind of just go play and make up for it. But then we've just seen the miscommunication. I mean, that's gotten better this year. But in the South Carolina game, you got wide open in the end zone. We haven't seen as much of that this year, but you still see it to a point. And then this is the physicality, the lack of physicality. Tackling's been an issue all 4 years under Todd Grantham. And I know, and I'm in this camp, I'm in this mindset as well. Tackling is more of a player focus, physicality issue, but not when it's 4 years in a row, not when it's 4 seasons. And tackling's been an issue every year since. Guys out of position, that's part of it. The scheme takes them out of position, and they're really, out of position to make a tackle, diving at feet, one-arm tackles, linebacker play, non-existent. We'll see what this means for Christian Robinson down the road. He's a Todd Grantham disciple, and what does that mean for him at this point in time? Of course, just got the new deal last year when the reports that he was going to Michigan. What's the chain reaction of that? Now, speaking of chain reaction, it looks like Wesley McGriff, the new, not new, but coming in this year from Auburn, will take over play calling duties at defensive coordinator now for the rest of the year. So, but I know the initial reaction from many of you out there, too little, too late, of course, dating back to the move should have been made last year of getting rid of Todd Grantham, and Dan Mullen hitched his wagon to him. And now you see Florida sitting at 4-5 now on the year. And obviously now the move would have been right to get rid of Todd Grantham last year, but probably too little too late. And we'll see what this ultimately means for Dan Mullen down the road. But also the big question, where did this come from? Like I said, been saying it, this move was going to happen. Todd Grantham was not going to come back next year, but the move to move it up right now. Now, of course, it's on the heels of a dreadful performance versus South Carolina. And then I know Bob Redmond there for Swap 24/7. And I want to say I heard it somewhere too today, or was told somewhere, the whole report there from Bob that Scott Strickland and Dan Mullen had a verbal dispute there in the tunnel of William Bryce Stadium in Columbia. And then, as I said, I know there was a meeting today, and did the demands for the move to be made today come out of that? I don't think Todd Grantham was going to be here next year regardless, but I think the move probably would have been made after the season if Dan Mullen had full control over that. But do believe that, hinting at a little push, a little shove to throw a bone here, make a move now. This one more than likely was going to be made anyway. Go ahead and make it. Now, I'm a bit surprised with the John Hevesy report that he's going to be let go as well. Somebody who has coached with Dan Mullen for 20 years, 20 years, give or take. And definitely coached together at Florida under Urban Meyer. And heard off and on that could be a possibility that he will be also let go at the end of the year. But this one caught me by surprise with the report today. I'm not going to lie about that. This is one, Grantham, while he has been with Dan Mullen for a while, nowhere near as long as the nucleus of Mullen, Hevesy, and Gonzalez. And we know the play of the offensive line the last couple of years. 2018, that detailed Todd Grantham's little bit of history here at Florida. 2018, it ended pretty well for the offensive line. It was a slow start, getting used to Dan Mullen's way of doing things. But by the end of the year, that offensive line was a strength at the end of 2018. And Martez Ivey there on the left side, Juwan Taylor there as well for that Gator offensive line. And by the end of the year, it was a pretty good offensive line. Jordan Scarlett, Michael P. Ryan, Felipe Franks really could count on those guys to open holes for him and get some yards. And then lose some pieces there on that offensive line and never really recovered. Never really recovered there, John Hevesy. And 2018 or 2019, 2020 left a lot to be desired in the run game. Couldn't count on the run game. Not a lot of physicality, not a lot of open holes. Well, Michael P. Ryan could bust a big run here or there in 2019, but that was a lot of him. And you go back to that Auburn run that everybody loves so much, and there's Michael P. Ryan making plays, breaking tackles, getting to the outside and outrunning people. It's not enough. Not enough of what we saw toward the beginning of this year. You had your little spurt against FAU, USF, Alabama, Tennessee. Since that, nothing. Looks a lot like what we've seen the last couple of years from this offensive line. Now, you can say this for a lot of teams out there. The worst recruited position on the field. And for Florida, it really is, and it's not even close. It's bad. And they've had their guys. You go back to a few recruiting classes ago, and guys never just making it on campus. You had your Isaiah Walkers of the world, who your 4-stars that you had committed at one point were supposed to be part of a class, never even made it to campus, never played a snap for Florida. So some unfortunate circumstance there, but a lot of the time you knew what you were getting into by taking chances on those type of players coming in and them never contributing. But this offensive line just not there. And now, I was a big believer coming into this year of the switch back to a mobile quarterback run-centric offense, that it would help somebody like John Hevesy, something he's recruited for, something he's developed for all throughout his coaching career, an offense he knows. And there were some good early returns. It didn't matter who Florida was playing a whole lot in 2019 and 2020. Florida wasn't running the ball on anybody. And then we got a little bit of glimpse at the beginning of this year. It's like, okay, there we go. Finally back to that. Had the great performance versus Alabama that the run game almost brought you back to win. And it started up front. You saw some better offensive line play. But putting on tape, injuries along the way as well, plays into, there's not a lot of depth because of recruiting. So you weren't really going deep into the depth chart. And when you are playing your depth, they're not at the level they should be. And then you see the type of results you're getting, especially lately. Like I said, the game against South Carolina, LSU looked a whole lot like 2019 and 2020 as far as physicality goes. And, I bring up the word physicality here, and we're talking about coaches right now being let go. When do we start looking at Nick Savage? I know we all love Nick Savage and the camaraderie he brings to this team, but how many times is the word soft going to be used? Physicality, lack of physicality going to be used? Where does that start? It starts with Nick Savage in the weight room and the mentality there. When we start asking that question, it's been asked. I've seen it out there. But you kind of look at who Florida's getting rid of according to this report. Defensive coordinator Todd Grantham, offensive line coach John Hevesy. A lot of that is because of a physicality, a want to, a toughness. That's what you want to describe a defense. That's what you want to describe an offensive line. That's not there. Hasn't been there. And that starts with Nick Savage. So when do we start asking ourselves that question? But that was the one that still caught me by surprise a bit. Just given the history there. If there was one that I thought if a move was going to be made, it would not be made during the season just because of the history, because of those guys coaching together. Of course, they're friends. I mean, they've been coaching together for years. That I thought, there would be a wait to make the move after the season. But obviously something happened between Saturday, Sunday, and now late Sunday. We get the word that Todd Grantham and John Hevesy will be let go. So, of course, big moves being made. We'll see where Florida goes for that. I believe there was a report out there as well. Zach Alberverdi, everybody knows him from the Gainesville Sun. Graduate assistant Michael's, I don't know how to say his last name here, Solene. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, but he'll be filling in for the offensive line role, coaching offensive line there. So grad assistant taking over there at offensive line for the rest of the season there for the Gators. Can't say I'm surprised moves were made. I think after South Carolina, all bets were off. Most expected November to be the beginning of a stretch for Florida to get back on the right track. Then you go to Columbia, get slaughtered, and here's the results. A day after that, you get reports of 2 firings here with Todd Grantham and John Hevesy. So what's next? Does it even matter? There's a question. Does it even matter? Does this mean Dan Mullen is safe? Does this mean these moves are made for Dan Mullen to save his job? I definitely think it was to throw a bone out there to please some boosters, please the fan base. Something had to be done. Prove that moves will be made. But what does this mean for Dan Mullen? If you go back and listen to the episode I put out today there, and Florida's hitting rock bottom right now, and I don't see much light at the end of the tunnel. What do these moves? Does that mean Dan Mullen safe? Does that mean there's nothing that can happen the rest of the season? But as long as these moves are made, Dan Mullen still has a job in 2022. I don't know. We'll see if I don't think he liked making these moves. Well, we already know, given his history, he likes sticking with these coaches. I mean, of course, right now, as it stands, these moves are made, these firings are made, and if we are led to believe that with these, he will now have to make new hires. He's gonna waited too long already, but now he's gonna have to nail these hires, these next hires. And granted, the hires he's made since the replacements he's hired since he's been at Florida, the few that have been here have been pretty good. David Turner, Tim Brewster, pretty good hires. But you're about to make your biggest one next. If you're going to be here in 2022, and this move signifies that you're going to be, if that's what it signifies, you better nail these hires. And we'll get into that. I know everybody wants a big board of who's next at defense. We got plenty of time to get into that, as I said. And I have promised you guys that I would get into it once the move is made. The move is going to be made. But still got an episode tomorrow night with Will. So I'll put a board together. Doug Belk, I've already said his name. I'll give you one. Would be at the top of my list. Houston defensive coordinator, former DB coach at West Virginia, moving over with Dana Holgerson. Believe Kirby Smart tried to get him as a DB coach at Georgia along the way. Doug Belk is originally from Valdosta, recruited the state of Florida for West Virginia. I'd like the young route, young fiery route. Doug Belk fits that mold for me. So that's one reason his name is up there. I don't know if he'd be at the top, but he's near it for me. Might be at the top. But I'll give you some more names as the week goes through. But it's a move, guys, here, of course, I think had to be made. Definitely had to be made. As we go back to last year, thinking the move should have been made then. Hopefully, if the way all this plays out, hopefully, if Dan Mullen's going to be head coach at the University of Florida, that this is not a too little, too late move, and that you kind of just dug your own grave with this. We talked about that a couple weeks ago on Gators Breakdown, Will and I, about the kind of whole timeline of this. You could have used this year with the retooled offense, a defense learning along the way to set up a big 2022. But now 2022 is going to be a kind of a desperation mode. 2022 is going to be now, and offense probably still trying to figure out its way. Maybe, probably, Anthony Richardson leading the charge. But now, and pretty much, if Dan Mullen's going to be head coach next year, a do or die year for Dan Mullen. So you're going to have to nail this defensive coordinator hire, and they're going to have to respond right away. Does this buy Dan Mullen grace period, a grace period here by making these moves? Is it more than 2022 of that grace period? Are you going to waste an offense by a defense trying to figure out their way? A lot of fans ain't going to be happy about that either. So that's why the timeline, that's why the move should have been made last year. But, of course, a lot of the hot names out there, we can dive deeper into them, especially defensive coordinator. Offensive line, of course, I have to do a lot more research there for offensive line coach. And Field Trotwine, of course, that's the name there. It starts and ends with him right there until Florida hires somebody else. The offensive line coach at Penn State, former Gator, of course. A lot of people are going to want him. That's going to be the name you hear the most out there. The names you'll hear, defensive coordinator, I'm going to go ahead and throw a couple out of the way. I don't think will happen at all. Will Muschamp? Nah, that's not happening. So go ahead and move on from that. Yeah, that's the one that comes up the most. That not can't get on board with that one. Do I think it'd be a good fit? Absolutely, as far as a defensive coordinator. But Will Muschamp's not coming to Georgia, or not leaving Georgia to come to Florida. So, but yeah, Gene Chizik's name's going to come up a whole lot. Had him on the podcast, of course, back in the summer. Asked him, what would it take to get back into coaching? He gets that question a lot. He said the perfect fit. It would have to be the perfect fit. He's a Gator. He played at Florida. Would he consider Florida? He would. But where would he be on the pecking order? And I see in the YouTube comments here, you could forget about Charlie Strong. DJ Durkin would be an interesting name. I don't know if the off-field issues would come back to haunt somebody like DJ Durkin. Of course, coached at Florida with Urban Meyer, Will Muschamp. I think it's a name worth keeping an eye on. I don't think it would happen with the off-field stuff, but I don't know. I don't know. But he is part of an Ole Miss defense that not so sure, is where they should be, an improvement from last year to this year. Kevin Steele's the name that's going to come up. I see that there from Demetrius. There's some reports last year. Not reports. Stuff sent my way from completely two different sources. One an Auburn source, one a Florida source, that Steele was on campus last year, in December of last year. Who knows what that conversation was about? I would assume a defensive coordinator job at Florida. I think there was a conversation if Todd Grantham was going to be allowed to come back for 2021. But I'm just telling you what I heard. Kevin Steele was on campus. Heard it from two completely different people there. So maybe there's a connection there. But all right, there we go. Like I said, we'll get into more names down the road here for defensive coordinator. It's going to take Florida's not hiring anybody in the next. That hire's not going to be made till after the season. Yeah, there we go. All right. I'm exhausted, if you can't tell. Drive back from Columbia today. Already threw you out one episode of Gators Breakdown. passionate episode there of Gators Breakdown about the Gators hitting rock bottom. But here we go. A lot of you get the news you want. Got the news I want with the move that needed to be made here. Florida will have a new defensive coordinator in 2022. Would that be the extent of it? I still think more moves are made. These are not the only assistant moves I expect, by the way. I still think there will be more. As I said, Christian Robinson's probably the one to look out for now with his connection to Todd Grantham. What does it mean for him? What's the timeline on that one too? Does that wait till after the year? The tricky thing with him and the best recruiter you have on staff, but it really hasn't amounted to much. Now, finally got some true linebackers on, but they're the younger linebackers. No time to see the field yet, where they make a difference. But if a full reset on defense is needed, by all means, do it. Are there some pieces on this defense? I like David Turner, and I can go ahead and tell you for a fact the players love David Turner. That one would hurt a lot of players. Now, of course, what comes out? I mean, here's another thing before I sign off on here. What does this mean for transfers? What does I've seen some recruits' reactions out there. Some like it, some don't. But they've seen where this Florida defense is. Of course, you'll get both sides of it. But something to look out for. Todd Grantham's gone. Not so sure that's going to impact who stays, who goes in the transfer portal. But when you start losing these assistants that these players are much closer to, like Christian Robinson, who's brought a lot of guys in, a David Turner, who I know the players love, Jules Montanar, who just comes in, Wesley McGriff, who just comes in. As I said, McGriff's taking over play calling right now. But if it takes a clean slate, I mean, whoever you bring in as defensive coordinator should be allowed to bring in whoever they want. They don't want any holdovers from this current staff. You just got to bite the bullet. I know a lot of players won't like it. Probably get some transfers out of the program for that. But if you're going to believe in this new defensive coordinator you bring in, especially for Dan Mullen now, he pretty much hands over the defense. You're going to have to trust that person. So there we go. All right, that's what to look out for. All right, we'll get into more to it. I will do a Twitter Spaces chat on Monday morning, like I always do every Monday. So your reaction to all this news. I don't think we'll be looking back at Florida, South Carolina too much. I mean, probably because that was the final straw here. But we'll get your reaction on Twitter Spaces. So be sure to join that if you're on Twitter. Usually happens around 7:45 Monday mornings. So we'll get your reaction to that. Go ahead and check out the latest episode of Gators Breakdown besides this one right here. Talk about the rock bottom aspect of where Florida is right now. And then Will Miles and I will be back on Monday night like we always are. And we'll, when Will and I get together, we'll have plenty of back and forth on this one. Something we agreed with for quite a while now that needed to happen here. So, all right. That would do it for this episode of Gators Breakdown. I'm your host, David Waters. You can find me on Twitter at GatorDave_SEC. Got some girls out there. Thanks for listening to this episode of Gators Breakdown.